Welcome to the Nutrition Mission Podcast.
This is where we're going to share information about nutrition and have insights into your own personal needs, as well as product information, as well as other information. You've got to be part of this nutrition mission.
This is the official Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market podcast. And we've been helping people live better lives since 1972. We're on a nutrition mission. Join us.
All right. Hey, this is Starkie Sowers. Welcome again to another Nutrition Mission podcast brought to you by Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market. So cool moment. We're going to talk about keto today. So keto is kind of crazy, right? It goes through a craze for like about 5-7 years, maybe 8 years, and it kind of drops off, then it comes back. It drops off, comes back. Well, let's do a little history about the keto diet, all right? Let's go back to 1960s. Let's talk about Vince Gironda, literally called the Iron Guru, up in Studio City, California, was actually known as the trainer of the stars. Personal friend of mine, started going up there in late 1979, early 1980, hung out with him, spent a lot of time with him. He was one of the guys that really started kind of like popularizing the idea of going ketogenic. It was really weird though. He never called it the keto diet. And the keto diet craze actually kind of started, like I said, probably about 10 years ago. And ultimately the name keto kind of stuck because you're ultimately trying to hit that moment of ketosis, right? Well, what Vince did was this. He was always experimenting with different things. He had different types of stars and athletes that would go up to see him, and he would use different diets on different people. So, what was weird is a lot of times people go, hey, Vince was all keto. No. And one time he said the best shape he ever got into was eating carbs at night and then eating proteins and fats all day long. So lo and behold, he was always trying something kind of tweaking, something new. But he was one of the first guys to start talking about a high protein, high fat diet. So ultimately, as I said, he was also one of the first guys to kind of start talking about a keto diet. He actually started saying that he was using about 60, maybe 80 grams of protein a day, and the rest of all of his calories literally came from fat. And so by doing that, it causes the body to use fat as an energy source because it takes away from the stored up carbs first. And then what it does is it starts using the fat source. His ultimate goal obviously was bodybuilding definition because he competed as a bodybuilder. And so he said in his moment, hey, miraculous results. I felt better than ever before. Only need like 2 meals a day. And one of his meals was like steak and eggs in the morning. And then he did like a salad with olive oil all over it. And then he ate steak and eggs at night. And that was kind of his diet for like 6 weeks. And he said he felt like $1 million, never lost strength and lost all the body fat he needed to lose. Before you try the diet, I've had some other people that have done it and said it didn't work. So a lot of times you remember this, you have biochemical individuality, just like Vince. He was always trying different things on different people. And so ultimately what would happen though is when he would write in a magazine or something like that, it was like the authority. So everyone just said, okay, that's what he's doing. He's only doing that. Well, he was oftentimes doing other things. So then, of course, the next person along who basically was around about the same time that he was talking about it was Dr. Atkins. Everyone's heard about the Atkins diet. And so what he was doing was more along the lines of like a high protein and high fat diet and minimal carbohydrate. A little bit more protein than what the keto diet recommends, sometimes a little bit less, depending on the person that was like tweaking their diet. So ultimately, let's talk about keto diet. Where did it get its name? So ultimately, the keto diet is this. When you ultimately eliminate all the carbs, the body starts using more fats as energy source. So what it does is it goes through a metabolism moment. So as it metabolizes the fats, there's some byproducts that are left over. Those byproducts are known as ketones, all right? So there's different types of ketones. There's ketones in the blood, there's ketones in the urine, there's also ketones in your breath, all right? So with a lot of my athletes, we would use the keto diet. What I would do is I would have them use urine strips. And when they hit ketosis, I say, okay, that's the point where we want to stop. We'll add some more carbs, and we'll talk about cyclical ketone in a minute. All right. So ultimately what happens is this. Ketones are developed as a byproduct of eating excessive amounts of fats or using fats as a primary source. And as I said, they'll come out of the body in a couple of different ways. So in the bloodstream, they end up being beta-hydroxybutyrate lactate. So ultimately it ends up being like a butter fat almost, for lack of better terms. Then when it comes out of the urine, it becomes a ketone. Ketoacidosis is typically a different term. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then also when it comes out of the breath, it ends up being like a ketone as well. So ultimately, the technical terms on these things are kind of a little bit fun. So let's dig them up and I'll give them to you real quick. So ketones out of the blood, beta hydroxybutyrate, urine acetoacetate, and then the breath is acetone. So if somebody's in ketosis, oftentimes what happens, we end up in a situation where they smell like their breath smells bad. They've got like a vinegary smell. By the way, that doesn't last oftentimes for too long. It depends on the situation. Now, there's also what is known as diabetic ketoacidosis. Very different. That basically means that there's a failure in the system to metabolize glucose. The body's actually using ketones in excessive amounts of breakdown, and it's a very dangerous situation. So a lot of people have said, oh, why would you want to do a ketone diet? Because you're going to go into ketoacidosis. No, that ketoacidosis specifically has to do with diabetic situations when the blood actually becomes very acidic, and it's very dangerous. It's a very different situation. Not to be confused. Separate the two of them out. All right? So what are some of the common reasons why people would do it? Obviously, weight loss. Another common reason is insulin balance. People that are having a difficult time losing weight that need to control their insulin. How do you know if you have too much insulin? If you've got too much body fat around the middle of the waist, oftentimes your body's just got a tough time managing carbs. You could either be eating sugars, the wrong type of carbs, things of that nature. Sometimes people use the keto diet just to kind of wake the body up, get rid of that insulin dependency, and get the body metabolizing foods from a different angle. Another reason why, believe it or not, cardiovascular disease. Had a friend of mine one time, we did a metabolic typing diet. By the way, I recommend the metabolic typing diet book. I think that's a primary book for you to be able to figure out what your metabolism does best with. And so what happened, he went to the doctor, had high cholesterol, all sorts of different issues, had complications with his heart, all these different things were going on. He weighed about 300 pounds. Time to do the diet. So the guy puts him on a basic diet. He goes on the basic diet, gains 20 pounds, and all his markers get worse. The doctor goes, I don't understand. Of course you don't understand, because his body type needed something different. So he comes in, we put him on basically like a high protein, high fat diet, low carb, get him down to about 220 pounds after a year, and guess what? All the problems go away. Doctor says, yeah, I'm glad my diet's working. He's never told him, hey, you know what? I didn't do your diet. I did something else, because that was the only thing that worked, right? All right, inflammatory control. Too much sugars in the system creates inflammation. Ultimately, too much sugars, mismanaged sugars, seriously cause all sorts of inflammation problems. People that use keto diet oftentimes are trying to reduce the susceptibility of inflammation throughout the whole body. The other thing is intestinal tract health. Obviously, in that situation, inflammation. Dr. Josh Axe was the guy that started recommending the keto diet. He was one of the guys on the internet saying, eat collagen, do collagen, help to rebuild the gut. Everything starts in the gut. He's the one that's got everybody gut-minded going on. At the same time, he said the keto diet, just for a short period of time, was an exceptional way to get the gut back into shape. He never recommended for long durations. They actually had a book that they put out, and they recommended like kind of cycling keto throughout the years, a little bit different, all right? Another reason why is actually nervous disorders, anxiety, different things like that. People that have more fats, believe it or not, calms the brain, calms the body. Very effective. The other thing is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, with females. A couple of my daughters, both my daughters actually have kind of suffered with some of these symptoms of that. And one of my daughters does keto kind of off and on. She feels better with her menstrual cycles, things of that nature. That's another reason why. All right? So what's the ratio, though? What are we looking at? So when we look at the pyramid, so to speak, on ketones is this. We're literally looking at like 5% of your diet from carbs. So let's say we're going to base everything on like a 2,000 calorie diet. So 5% basically boils down to roughly about 30 grams of carbs a day. Okay, so that's where you're staying, right? So then on the 30 grams a day, on the carbs, what's the fat look like? What's the protein look like? So we look at the protein. Proteins run about 20 to 30% depending on the type of person that you're following. So if it's 20%, so that's what? 400 divided by 4, so it's about 100 grams of protein a day. It's a pretty big chunk. So then the remaining 60, 70% is from fat. So if you go 70%, that's 1,400 calories divided by 9. Dude, you're looking at about 100 and some odd grams of fat. So it's a very big chunk of fat. All right, and we'll talk some details about that as you go along. So that's the typical like moment to look at, right? So now let's talk about this. There's a couple different types of diets that are out there. So when you look at it, there's not only the ketone diet, which typically, or the keto diet that everybody rages about, there's some tweaks to it. So when I say there's some tweaks, you got to listen carefully. There's the standard keto diet, which is what I just gave you right now, the standardized keto diet. And so we're going to talk about food groups. I've got a little handout. It's free if you guys ever want it. Just write to us, let us know, or just hit us up on the net. We'll send it out to you, or we can actually send it in digital form. It's like just a quick summary of everything that we're doing here today. All right, so Standard keto diet is what I explained to you. Then there's the cycle keto diet. Okay. This cycle keto diet started literally in the late 80s, early 90s. So when you start talking about ketones and the craziness of keto diets, dude, they've been around forever. All right. I probably should back it up and say one other thing. And so ultimately back in the day, like in the 1800s, 1700s, before we hardly even knew what a protein or a fat or a carbohydrate was, we didn't even know what any nutrients were, didn't have any discovery of any vitamins. Some of the minerals were understood. The doctors knew in the 1700s, here's how you dealt with somebody that had diabetes, all right? You're going to love this story. So what happens is this. You're a doc, right? Somebody comes to you and they're not metabolizing sugars, and there's different things that you can see that are complexities that are going on, weight gain, other different things like that, night sweats, all these other different things that might be going on. All right, so doctor says, oh, I think you have a problem with your sugar. So how would you know, doc? Back in those days, well, they didn't have lab tests. They didn't do this. Hey, pee on the ground. Let me drink it and see if it. So two options. Pee on the ground tomorrow. If there's ants around it, then we know you got a problem. Number two is pee in a cup and I'll drink it. If it tastes like sugar, then I know you got an issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to take foods out until I put my finger into your urine and taste it on a regular basis and finally go, hey, there's no sugar in the urine anymore. Now we're good. That's what you're eating. All right. So chances are, today's laboratory analysis are a little bit more efficient, so we don't have to do stupid stuff like that. Ultimately, here's the deal. By the way, don't do that at home, okay? All right, so ultimately, here's the deal. The cycle keto diet gets developed in the late 80s, early 90s. A guy's name is Dr. D. Pasquale. And what he does, he writes the book. It's called Metabolic Diet. He says, here's the deal. A lot of people trying to lose weight, and he had a weight loss clinic, things of that nature. He goes, this is what I do. I put them on the keto diet. What I do is I put them on a strict keto diet, 30 grams of carbs a day. That's all you're going to get. High amounts of fats and a fair amount of proteins, actually a little bit more than what most people recommend on the typical keto diet. The reason why is because he's got athletes and he's trying to get them in shape. So he's adding the proteins to make up the difference. All right, so it's a little bit of a tweak, something like Vince Gironda. All right, so then ultimately what happens is this. D. Pasquale gets in there and says, here's how I'm going to do this. We're going to go strict for 2 weeks. So strict for 2 weeks. Every day, 2 weeks, you're doing the deal. The end of 2 weeks, how are you feeling? Okay, I'm feeling good, but you know what? When I do my workouts, I'm exhausted. He goes, okay, what we're going to do then is we're going to come back through and we're going to sprinkle more carbs in, like 30 to 50 grams, either like an hour before the workout or a little bit after the workout. So ultimately, we call that targeted keto dieting, all right? So he would do that first and then try to get him through the week. And then ultimately what he started doing on Saturday and Sunday, he flips the diet. So he takes the diet from being a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet into a full carb diet, moderate protein and low fat. 2 days in a row, saturated up. So you got Saturday and Sunday, it's your weekend off. You basically end up in a situation where you're just going to live it up, do what you need to do, and then go back to keto first thing Monday morning. A couple of my trainer buddies use this on a regular basis, and it works amazing because you get sick and tired of doing keto all the time. This, by the way, people ask me, what do I do? I notice when I do keto all the time, my gallbladder starts acting up at 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. As Chinese medicine would indicate, that's the gallbladder hour, right? Have a tendency of falling asleep or wake up those times. Gallbladder's barking oftentimes. So what happens is this. Ultimately, he says, what you want to do is be in a situation where you're kind of monitoring those situations, ultimately adding the carbs back and forth. Same thing what I did is carbs after workout, carbs maybe before bed, and then starve carbs during the day. I do a targeted keto on a regular basis, ultimately still not being full keto, having more carbs. So I manage my carbs, okay? So let's get back to his diet. Weekends, boom, you've got 2 days. Then what he does after that, sprinkle carbs around the workout. And then if you need more. So what he's ultimately doing is this. He's training your body to be able to learn how to manage carbohydrates effectively without gaining weight. And also helping with athletic and performance, and also kind of helping you to kind of relax away from it. Very different. So that was his diet situation. A lot of athletes, a lot of people use it. It's called cyclical keto dieting, right? As I said, there's target keto dieting. Target keto dieting is a lot what I do when I have a tendency to compete for a show. So what I'm trying to do is use the carbs at the right moment and make sure that my body's using them throughout the day. What we do know is this. On the days you work out, believe it or not, there's a lot of stats. International Society of Nutrition states that International Society of Sports Nutrition states typically you can consume 200 to 300 grams of carbs on the days you work out. Your body uses it and doesn't create fat. So get away from the carb notion of It's going to ultimately cause fat all the time. All right. Then there's also what we call the high protein keto diet. That's probably a little bit more along the Atkins. 50% ultimately ends up being from proteins, 50 to 60%, 50 to 60% from fats, 35% from proteins, and about 10 to 5% from carbs. All right, so it kind of gives you a little analysis of what's there. As I said, if you want this information, we'll send it to you. In here, I've got a diet that's set up. So let me just read this to you really quick. So here's like a sample diet. So for breakfast, ultimately a lot of times people end up with a shake. So we do a shake, and ultimately in that shake, maybe you've got like a half avocado, you've got some cottage cheese, you've also got some cream, you also got some coconut oil, things of that nature. Whip it up in a blender. Lunch, what does lunch look like? Lunch looks like this: a tablespoon of coconut oil, along with 3 ounces of grass-fed beef, some spinach salad with a tablespoon of like blue cheese or some type of dressing, or like olive oil, or maybe 2 tablespoons, some grass-fed butter on top of that, things of that nature. Then dinner looks like this: coconut oil, some salmon, some vegetables, things of that nature. All right, so it's all kind of laid out for you in here. The foods of choice ends up being a lot of vegetables. It ends up being a lot of fats. It ends up being fatty cuts of meat, fatty cuts of fish, such as salmon, herring, things of that nature. A lot of people also have now popularized the last 2 years what we call, you ready for this, vegan ketoism. Okay? So what that means in this vegan keto moment, if you're going to go vegan keto, same thing. You're going to accentuate on the fats, but you're going to stay away from the animal fats. And what you're going to do is you're going to have to use some proteins that are in there: nuts, seeds, things of that nature, also some protein powder. So I brought some supplements with me today, some formulas, and we're going to have a look at that as well too. So the other thing to do is this. Let's say you're in a situation where like, hey, I want to do keto, but man, this sounds kind of crazy, right? So a guy named Dr. Bruce Fife, he wrote a book called Coconut Oil. Talked about coconut oil, called it Coconut Oil Cures. Then he did Coconut Oil Keto, Coconut Oil this, all these great books, by the way, you should read them. He basically said the way he liked to get people to do keto was through like an adaptation process. So what he did is recommended using coconut oil, MCTs, or straight coconut oil. You see, add in like a couple tablespoons or maybe a tablespoon a day. Slowly try to get your body used to where it's getting fats into the system. Eventually work up to like maybe 4 or 6 tablespoons of coconut oil a day. That was his thing. It was coconut oil based. Remember, coconut oil is a little bit different. They're MCTs. They're medium chain triglycerides. Medium chains means this: the body pulls them in, pulls it through the digestive system. You might not know this. You might know this. Short chain and medium chain triglycerides head to the liver, end up in the bloodstream for quick energy, and create the body to go into ketones, or it creates ketones instantly. So you're almost like in a quick state of ketosis. So what he would recommend is starting with this, getting the body adapted to the excessive amounts of fats, slowly but surely start getting rid of the grains and the different things that have the carbs in it, and then just kind of get your body to do a little tweak and learn how to get into it. Probably one of the smartest ways to do it, all right? Another guy by the name of Dave Asprey recommended doing the same thing, and he kind of cycled his ketos. And, of course, he has the Bulletproof Cafes. He's the one who started the collagen craze. So what you'll notice, a lot of people that do keto, the way they do breakfast is this: they do coffee. They throw collagen in it. Then they put in butter or ghee. And then the other thing they do is they put coconut oil and whip it up in the blender. And that ends up being breakfast for the moment. Mind you, you still got snacks and things throughout the day. All right. As I said, a lot of focus, those change with a lot of vegan vegetarians. So I thought I'd bring with me a couple other things. When it comes to breakfast, here's a keto meal, typical keto meal instant formula. So this is like a breakfast blend. So let me just do this. It's kind of fun. Here's the ingredients: grass-fed butter powder, right? Or organic grass-fed butter, right? Truly grass-fed whey protein, isolate, tapioca. It also ends up in here having stevia. That's another thing to remember. So ultimately, what is this? 22 grams of fat, 16 grams of carbs. 16 grams of protein, 5 grams of carbs. So this meets that keto specs. So here's one thing to remember. There's been a craze that's exploded with the keto revolution. Different types of sugar substitutes, because people like sweetness. So they use stevia. They'll use xylitol. They also end up using monk fruit. All these different tagatose, all these different things. So you'll find a lot of those substances in these keto things. A lot of times when they first start using it, I use them, they definitely have a tendency to kind of upset my gut and kind of like to run through my body. It's like instant laxative. So heads up on that. Once you start using it, kind of work your way through it. So ultimately, this is Clean Keto, Sun Warrior. They put this out, and this ends up being the vegetarian And so it's a whole different ingredient listing. So we read this ingredient listing: medium chain triglycerides from coconut oil, acacia fiber, fava bean protein, organic fermented pea protein. So this ends up being a whole spectrum difference. By the way, these are in RTDs. This is keto-friendly, plant-powered. This is the Koi Keto. This is fun. You can get literally pancakes. You can get nutrition bars. You can get all the different things. So here's my newest favorite one that I pulled off the shelf. It's called the Keto Brick. It's literally a keto brick. So here's what happens. This guy, Robert Sykes, he ends up being like a bodybuilder, kind of promoting the idea of using it. He says, this is what I like doing. Literally what this is cacao butter. This has whey protein. It's 1,000-calorie brick. It literally is like the size of like the Monster chocolate bar. And you're supposed to eat this as a snack either intermittently. So I have it hanging around on my desk. Every now and then I'll just take a couple bites, get a little bit of good fats in me. So the other thing he was recommended, like, okay, if you're on the run, you don't have enough food, here's 1,000 calories for you. Try to get another 1,000 calories another way. So he's kind of like got this whole thing. It's like his mantra, kind of cool stuff. Finally, a lot of people like me get a little bit of a bark in the liver. So when it comes to digesting the fats, choline and acetylmethionine are what we call lipotropics. These lipotropics help the body use fats efficiently and prevent them from building up in the liver. So a lot of people end up using things like this. I brought Reduce. It's a product that I actually make. It's a little bit different. You can get fat solve, other different types of compounds, but the lipotropics really seem to help with the digestive process. Finally, last thought. If you're going to do keto, I think it's best to start out nice and easy. Get your body acclimated to it. Some other people just go for it 100% and just feel like $1 million. Start easy, find out which process works best for you, and be educated. Don't sit there and just listen to my podcast. I got enough information to do it. Make sure if you want to, hit us up on the internet or whatever you want to do, email or just hit up on the podcast. Say, hey, I want the folder. We'll send it out to you. It gives you a little bit of information to start. Good books. As I was saying, Dr. Bruce Fife. Another great book is the one they call the Keto Reset Diet. This is by Mark Sesson. And so what ultimately happened in this situation, Mark was like the guy that made paleo huge. He was like about paleo, kind of with some tweaks. And then he started using keto at different moments with some positive benefits. So definitely get educated. Take your time. Don't just like go off a podcast and do it. Spend some time and get used to knowing some of the terms, what kind of foods you want to go shopping, do the deal, make it work. All right. Hopefully this helps get you started on the right direction. Have fun and have a great day.
Thank you guys for joining us today on our Mission Nutrition podcast, the official Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market podcast. We've got another exciting episode for you next week, so be sure to review, subscribe, follow us, and stay connected.
Absolutely. Be part of it. We've got so much we're going to share with you. It's going to be an amazing ride.
We'll see you next time.